You know, when you think about American invention, two names probably pop into your head right away: Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. And the story we've all heard is pretty simple: a classic rivalry, a clash of titans, progress marches on. But the source material for this explainer, well, it argues that this story is more than just simple. It's a carefully constructed myth, a myth that hides a much darker and, frankly, a much more important history. So let's get into it.
Oh yeah, we all know this one. It's on posters, it's in business books. It's the ultimate mantra for the tireless inventor, right? The American genius who just kept trying until he got it right. And this quote, it's really the foundation of the whole Edison myth, this hero of gritty, practical invention. But our source material asks us to look a little closer, to read the fine print behind the inspirational quote.
So you've got Edison's greatest hits, right? They're legendary. The phonograph? Genuinely his, a true breakthrough. The light bulb? Well, he turned it into a whole electrical system, which was genius. But then, the elephant. It just doesn't fit, does it? It feels like a typo in the history books. But according to our source, it's not a mistake. It's the key.
And that is the big question here. Because the answer, as our sources lay it out, doesn't just add a new chapter to the story, it completely unravels that heroic narrative we've been fed. It reveals a saga that isn't just about healthy competition, but about calculated cruelty, a massive disinformation campaign, and a path that was deliberately chosen for profit, not for progress.
All right, so Section 1, the hero and the eccentric. What we're going to do here is walk through the source's really challenging account of these two figures. It argues that the popular images we have, Edison the practical hero and Tesla the weirdo eccentric, they aren't just oversimplifications. They were deliberately built and they're still doing a job, actively shaping the world we live in right now.
Okay, moving on. Section 2, Edison, an honest accounting. First, let's dig into the guy our source calls the Magnate. We're going to break down the source's assessment of Edison's actual track record and try to peel away the layers of mythology that he himself was so good at creating.
Okay, so let's break this down, because this is where it gets really interesting. The source is fair. It gives Edison his due. The phonograph was his. The whole idea of an industrial research lab? Revolutionary. And not just inventing the light bulb, but creating the whole system around it? Game-changing. But it also points out that the basic idea for the bulb wasn't his, and a ton of the inventions that have his name on them, well, they were actually the work of the people who worked for him.
And this right here, this was the engine behind the whole operation. The source argues that Edison's famous lab wasn't just a magical place for invention, it was a legally airtight machine for turning other people's brainpower into his personal patents. If you wanted a job there, you signed away the rights to anything you came up with. That wasn't a side note, that was the business model.
So, the war of currents. You might think it was this high-minded debate about technology, AC versus DC. Nope. Our source says it was a flat-out, brutal smear campaign. Edison's team started publicly electrocuting dogs they bought from local kids, to prove AC was dangerous. They heavily lobbied for the first electric chair to use their rival's AC current. And it all culminated in the public, filmed execution of Topsy the elephant. I want you to just sit with this number for a second. 8 minutes. That's how long the source says it took to kill William Kemmler in that first AC-powered electric chair. It was an absolute horror show. And the source asserts this was intentional. It was allegedly engineered by Edison's people to be a horrific, drawn-out failure, all to forever link the term AC with agony and death.
So let's be crystal clear about what was happening here. According to the source, these public spectacles, these killings, they weren't science experiments. This was marketing, plain and simple. It was a calculated, vicious strategy to use dead animals and a tortured human being as props to protect Edison's business empire from a technology that was, frankly, better.
Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about the other guy in this story, Nikola Tesla. Our source paints him as someone who wasn't just a brilliant inventor, it says he was a mind operating in a different register, someone whose brain was just tuned to a completely different frequency than the rest of us.
Look, if you take away only one thing about Tesla, it has to be this: the rotating magnetic field. This isn't just an invention, it's the invisible engine running pretty much everything in the modern world. Every power grid, every electric motor in your car, your blender, your fan, it all comes back to this principle. And the source says Tesla didn't tinker his way to it, he saw it, complete and fully formed in his mind.
And believe me, that was just the beginning.
The entire AC polyphase system that powers our civilization, radio, remote control, the basic circuits that make modern electronics possible, the list just goes on and on. And these weren't just a list of cool ideas, these were the literal blueprints for the 20th century and beyond.
And then you get to this. It's just staggering. After a falling out with Edison's company, the man whose mind contained the keys to the modern age, the man who had visualized the engine of the 20th century, was forced to spend 2 years digging ditches in New York City for $2 a day, just to eat.
So, why was he digging ditches? How did this even happen? Well, the source tells the story of how Edison had promised Tesla $50,000, we're talking millions today, if he could redesign Edison's inefficient DC motors. Tesla, being Tesla, did it. And when he went to collect, Edison supposedly just laughed and said this. The source is really clear on this. This wasn't a joke that got lost in translation. This was exploitation.
All right, Section 4, the choice that shaped a century. And this brings us to a moment that wasn't just a turning point for Tesla. According to the source, this was a turning point for all of us, for the entire planet. We're talking about the Wardenclyffe project.
So what was Tesla trying to do at Wardenclyffe? Honestly, it's mind-blowing. He realized the Earth itself, along with the ionosphere, acts like a giant natural electrical resonator. His plan was to basically ring that bell to create a standing wave of energy all around the globe. The result? Anyone, anywhere, with the simple receiver could tap into nearly limitless power and information wirelessly.
Sounds amazing, right? Free, wireless energy for everyone. But there was one tiny problem. A business problem. And it's captured perfectly in this legendary question from his main backer, the banker JP Morgan. A system that gives energy away for free is a humanitarian dream, but it's a financial nightmare. How do you bill for it?
And this, right here, is the gut punch of the whole story. According to our source, Wardenclyffe wasn't torn down because it was pseudoscience or a fantasy. It was canceled because it was on the verge of working too well. Its success would have made the entire business model of selling electricity by the kilowatt hour totally obsolete.
Okay, last section. Section 5. What the mythology protects. So why do we still tell the old story? The simple story of the good inventor versus the weird one. Well, the source argues that this myth isn't just an old fairy tale. It's doing a job. It's actively protecting the very economic and innovation models that won out 100 years ago.
This chart really spells it out, doesn't it? The myth tells us Tesla was an impractical dreamer. The reality, says the source, is that his biggest project was canceled for business reasons. And what does that protect? The metered energy model we still use today. The myth says Edison's plodding trial and error approach is how real innovation works. The reality is that Tesla's method of pure mental derivation was faster and more profound. And what does that protect? The commercial patent-hoarding research model that Edison perfected.
So when you boil it all down, the source's argument is this, and it is powerful. We live in a world that was built on Nikola Tesla's genius, but that genius was captured, packaged, and sold to us inside Thomas Edison's business architecture. We got the wizard's magic, but only in a form the Magnate could put a meter on.
And so, our source material leaves us with this final, really provocative question. The 20th century that we inherited was the result of a choice that was made for business reasons. But all of Tesla's foundational work, his patents, his notes, they're all in the public domain now. The physics hasn't changed, so the question is, what will we choose to build for the 21st?